It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Shot something else out of the sky, this time over Alaska. President Biden ordered a fighter jet to go up and shoot down what they're calling a high-altitude object. Said it's about the size of a small car and that it posed a reasonable threat to civilian aviation. So it was somewhere within, planes could hit it. What I find interesting is the outrage and just the kind of collective crazy on the right over the balloon, over this. It's quite remarkable to me, especially when you look at the fact that you had Mitt Romney come out and say, the president actually did the right thing. There was some thought that went into this. There was some rationale that went into it. And we can't talk like that because gotta have our guy's not in the White House. So we've got to be against whatever happens. That's the narrative that's being thrown, especially on the right. When Trump was in office, he did something that I liked. I said I liked it. He said did something I didn't like. Didn't like it. Same thing here. If Biden does something I don't like, I'm gonna say I don't like it. That's the difference between the right and the left. The right, they walk in lockstep. And again, you see these kind of moments that are quite interesting to me. Now, what I find really, if you remembered right from the beginning, right when the balloon came on the scene, I said that, there's value in not immediately shooting it down and following it and, maybe collecting whatever information is being collected and, find out what they're looking at, figure out why they're looking at it. Because guess what? They got satellites. But this could be one of those things. Well, it turns out that by doing just that, the intelligence community figured out that there have been other ones and that this is a part of a much larger thing. Again, not being reactionary, but actually, thinking strategically. The reporting that I saw on it said that officials were able to use the information collected from the earlier balloon alongside other sources to discover that similar surveillance balloons had transited U.S. territory undetected at least 3 times during the Trump years. And you go, look, am I blaming Trump for that? No, he's not checking the radar every day. This is part of a plan by the Chinese Communist government to kind of provoke. But I got to tell you, I don't think it's military. I think they're looking at land that they want to buy up because they've been buying us up bit by bit. Nobody seems to be really upset about that. The balloon, everyone's freaked out about the balloon. I've been freaked out by the fact that China is buying our soul. They're buying all of our companies up. They're buying the best land up. They're buying shares. They're buying they're buying us. And, I think it was Matt Gaetz who, if you think the balloon's bad, wait till you see TikTok. I've been screaming about TikTok from almost the beginning. The second we found out it was the Chinese Communist government behind it, you go, should we be letting our kids have this? Because of the propaganda that they're constantly feeding us? Because it's interesting. They don't let their kids see the crap that's on TikTok. They just feed that poison to our kids. So what are we going to do? Nothing. Clearly nothing. But point fingers and argue amongst each other. Now, interestingly enough, this is where I've been watching the Republican Party kind of have this conversion. They're really trying to make a play for working people. So they've got to, the Social Security thing is a huge part of it. For years, they've been saying out loud that they want to destroy Social Security. That little performance they had during the State of the Union was interesting to me because it shows that they're transitioning. Maybe a surgery's coming, I don't know, but they're transitioning. And you had Trump's former acting defense secretary, this guy, Chris Miller, who's come out with a book. But in the book, he talks about cutting military spending in half. I'm going, what? A Republican talking about cutting military spending? He writes, our colossal military establishment was essential for a Cold War victory, but the Cold War has been over for 30 years. If we are truly going to end America's adventurism and retool our military to face the challenges of the next century, we should cut military spending by 40 to 50%. And again, this is one of those things that I've been saying for a very long time we should be doing. Take that money that we're wasting on blowing things up and misadventures around the world and spend it here. Build the best infrastructure, build the best manufacturing base, build the best supply lines, make the country independent. And I know the theory of the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s was interconnected world. We need to all, countries that the trade don't fight with each other. Nonsense. They just fight on a different plane. And we're seeing this with the Chinese. This has been what's gone on over the last 20 years. But the weird thing is we live in this really bizarre upside down world. Because if you saw the performance on Tuesday night with the Republicans acting, oh my God, shocked. Seriously? You think I want to cut Social Security? What? You're telling me that thing that I've been saying all these years? I can't believe it. And, I was remembering, one of my, I don't really have heroes, but someone I admired, comedian George Carlin, somebody who, was a great observer of the politic that we live in. And his quote was, along the lines of, what the owners of this country want. Basically obedient workers who are just smart enough to run the machines and shuffle the papers around and do the work, and dumb enough to not know that they're getting the shaft. You're working crummier jobs, longer hours, lower pay, reduced benefits, no more overtime, pensions that have been eviscerated, on and on and on, which is what has happened over the 20 plus years since he said this. Now, the part that's interesting for this moment, he said, back then, this is Carlin back then, saying now they're coming for your Social Security. They're coming for your Social Security money. They want your retirement money. They want it back so that they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And that, not a truer statement ever spoken. And the sad reality is I think he was right back then. They're going to get it. Because, going on the social media sites and saying, look, this is what Republicans have been saying. These are their words. Look at them. There's their face. That's them saying the reason I'm running for Senate in Utah is so I can pull Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid out by the roots. And just because he was the most brazen, just because Paul Ryan and Lindsey Graham and the rest of them don't come out and say, we're going to pull it out by the roots. Entitlement reform. They go, no, they're not trying to cut it. No. They haven't been saying that for the last 2 decades. That, in order to solve the budget problem, we've got to take on entitlements. And what that means is that means your Social Security. That means your safety net. That means Medicare. That means Medicaid. That means, that thing you've been paying into all these years, they want it. So they can keep feeding our tax dollars to this military machine. And it's not even the fact that the weird thing is it doesn't even go to the military, all of it. A good chunk of it goes to our investor class. Massive, massive handouts. Enormous amounts of welfare. And speaking of welfare, did you see the New York Times story today? That conservatives, pro-life conservatives, are embracing a new kind of welfare. They're going to cash payments to parents for each child they have. Now remember, walk with me if you will. Let's jump into the way back machine and go back to the Clinton era. You remember the whole fight over welfare? Remember the whole welfare deform that they rammed down people's throats? Got to get people getting a job. Let's get off their lazy behinds and stop pumping out units. They're literally now saying this is the Republican Party. Now understand that contract on America, one of their reforms during the Gingrich years was taking on welfare. And they did. They got Clinton to come along, sucker. They got him to come along and go, yep, we're going to sign on to it. did nothing to ensure that there were jobs available, did nothing to ensure that there was an infrastructure for people to get the jobs, get childcare for the need for kids to be watched, none of that stuff. Just go get a job. And ended Aid to Dependent Children, ADC, and brought in TANF, which Brett Favre evidently, pocketed a bunch of money down in Mississippi and is now suing people over. Weird. But we created this thing because, got to have skin in the game, got to get out there and work. Republican idea. Now you've got Republicans going, no, we've got to encourage people. We got to be pro-family. We've got to encourage people to have children, and we should pay them. So when you get the what was her name, the 300 kids and counting, that's who they're talking about. Good middle-class white families who can pump out a ton of units. We're going to pay them. Same thing with the charter stuff and the homeschooling stuff that they want to have funded. It's all about taking tax dollars and giving it to these welfare states so that they can destroy public institutions. They're not against socialism. They're just against socialism that helps, people. If it's helping corporate America, if it's enriching the already wealthy, oh boy, very pro-socialism. But I just found it interesting that, because on the social medias, you liberals, you libs, you're all socialists, communists. And the reality is you look at what they're proposing now. There's going to be a pivot here very soon. And I said this a while ago. Once they got a hold of ending Roe, they were going to have to start paying for these kids or figuring out how to get cheap labor, like we talked about yesterday, what they're doing in Iowa. And this is going to all be divided based on, you guessed it, the deserving and the undeserving. And where those lines are drawn. The frustrating part of this is the minions that vote for these folks have no sense of irony. Because today they're going to scream at me for being a socialist, and then tomorrow scream at me for not being a Republican because they fight for social programs. See how twisted this is? And again, it comes back down to the media empire that they've created. Look, I go back to that book I read in high school, and this is the reason they have to destroy public education, because they get people to learn and to think and then to be concerned. So if we just don't get them to learn and think, then there's nothing to be concerned about. 1984 was the book that I remember, we're living. And I've said it a million times. There are some of us who read it and go, wow, we don't want that. That's bad. And there are some who read it and go, wow, that's a great idea. We should do all this stuff. And I think I go back to my high school government teacher who said, when asked, how do you know which party you are? His definition was, are you closer to rich or poor? If you're rich, you're going to be for and wealthy, you're going to be for the Republicans. If you're poor and in need of help from social programs, you're going to be for Democrats. Everybody else, depending on where you are on that scale, you're going to decide if you're in the middle. Are you closer to rich or are you closer to poor? Because you're going to pay for them both. So where are you? And sadly, we've been convinced, embarrassed millionaires, if you will, that we're closer to the wealthy than we are to the poor. And I think there's part of me that goes, the pandemic may have shaken some people awake. That, those handful of paychecks away from real trouble, that's them too. So I think this is part of the reason conservatives are making this pivot. And the reason I brought up 1984 is Winston Smith, the guy in the book, the main character. His job was rewriting history daily. He would go and take yesterday's press release and go, well, that was wrong. He'd retype it and throw out the other one. Basically, a Wikipedia of news. Every day, just changing what happened yesterday. Yesterday, if something bad happened, tomorrow we need to rewrite that. Yesterday, something great happened. It's really, we're living in this kind of dystopian world already. That as a 15-year-old reading that book, going, wow, this would be a horrible place. I am here. The question is are we going to put up with it? Look, I'm all in favor of helping families, encouraging families to have children and to be able to help them get the food on the table, a roof over their head, and education, healthcare, all of those things, opportunities. But I know to my core, and this is where, having been part of the machinery for a while and knowing how this game plays, I know how this breaks out. It breaks out to the deserving and the undeserving. And again, back to my high school government teacher's frame. Where would I be as a child? I would have been on the undeserving end. Curious your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. On the talk.
Eggs, a staple of America's breakfast, have gone from a cheap source of protein to a luxury good.
Socialism bad, capitalism good.
Americans own 46% of the world's guns. I think we need to get our numbers up.
The biggest reason we're investigating the Biden family is we're concerned that this administration is compromised because of the millions of dollars that they've taken from China. And here we are today, Harris, with this spy balloon.
The next balloon might be filled with another virus.
Did that balloon take off from Wuhan?
Pop! Droplets all over. We're all on ventilators again.
And the message they're trying to send the world is, look, these guys can't even do anything about a balloon flying over U.S. airspace. And there was a message behind it.
But the balloon was shot out of the sky. What do you mean? I mean, the balloon was taken down.
If you've ever seen the movie Independence Day, where people are coming out to their porches, they're pulling over their cars, it really reminded me of that.
The catastrophic Chinese spy balloon spectacle clearly threatened American families.
President Trump would have been impeached over this.
President Trump put forward a very aggressive America First policy, and that's why China wouldn't fly balloons over America.
I don't know why they waited so long to tell people about this. And if they knew the trajectory that it was on, it seems from late last week.
All right,
early last week.
And we're also told, by the way, that this happened 3 times under the previous president. Obviously, there were no public notifications there.
And I've learned my lesson, and I can guarantee you that from now on, anything and everything is always going to be above board. It's largely always been above board.
Of all the tribulations the producers of Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark had to endure, we are very pleased, proud, and relieved to report working with George Santos was not one of them.
The RNC did, that their representatives didn't listen to the people of our country that wanted a change in the RNC leadership, because I was the top of all the polls. I almost doubled both of them combined in the Rasmussen report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, you may remember, again, it's amazing what our conservative friends come up with. You may remember years ago them saying, no, Roe is the destination. We got to get rid of Roe. We got to end abortion because we love the babies. And I remember going, look, eventually they're going to, if they get to this, if it ever happens, Griswold's next. They want to end contraception. And they are organizing around this like mad. And of course, the same kind of feigned outrage that you saw over the Social Security thing. No, we would never do that thing we've been telling you we want to do for 50 years. No, we would never do that. Well, Rich, what you've got right now is you got 20 Republican attorneys general warning CVS and Walgreens against selling what they're calling abortion pills by mail, because there's a judge in Texas who's about to decide whether this drug, this mifepristone, is something that should be, made illegal, and forcing the FDA to pull it off the market because they're calling it the abortion pill. This is that next step, because this pill, along with another drug, is used up to, 70 days. So this is a medical abortion. So what they're saying is we're going to do away with this. And that's the next step is this. And then comes plan B. And then you see where this is going, right? They're not going to stop because it's who they are. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on line 2. Alice, how are you today?
I'm doing well. So I wanted to point out to you, historically, when Hitler took over, he paid people to have children. Besides having the little baby farms where they had single women come in and breed with the single males that were considered the
chosen
Aryan
ones.
Stereotype.
Yeah.
And you also had Mussolini doing it in Italy. So apparently the Republicans have again gone back to the past, to find a plan. Does it surprise us?
No. It doesn't surprise me that this is also using the religion. I mean, the religion is the. In fact, right now there's a huge call by these same attorney generals who are running around saying they want to know who wrote this anti-Catholic memo down in Virginia, pointing out that there's some zealots in the Catholic Church, as in most religions. There's some crazy people, and maybe we better be cautious because crazy people do crazy things, like try and enact Christian Sharia law. Just a thought.
Yeah.
That is the right response right there.
Yeah. Same thing, different century, different decade. Yeah. All we can do is fight. Have a good evening.
There you go.
Rick.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, but I look at this, and again, I come back to the reality of where we are. I'm not against people of faith, and this is how you get painted. You're against people of faith. No, I'm good people. I've known people of faith my whole life. It's the zealots. It's the one who wear it on their shirts. It's the ones who tattoo it across their forehead. It's the ones who do well what they do. That's the scary part. It's the people who get into political office and then are repeatedly spewing Bible quotes while breaking all of the 10 Commandments. I mean, we're in this weird kind of divided world. And look, I've always believed we're in a country where people can pursue their life, their liberty, their pursuit of happiness. That's on you. Do what you want to do. You can do whatever it is you want to do, unless it infringes on me or somebody else. And this zealotry, this proselytizing and this extremism that you see now infiltrating our government. And I look at Sarah Huckabee Sanders as someone who embodies that kind of mean-spirited kind of Christianity, that kind of hatred. It's interesting to me that you get people who are talking about how much they love Jesus and how much they love God and how religious they are, and then we got to seal the border off and the heck with those people and kill those illegals, and you go, how does that balance? Because I grew up in the Catholic Church of the 70s. We were still learning about peace and social justice, love thy neighbor, help each other, that kind of stuff. The hippie liberal Jesus, not the angry Glock carrying Jesus. Because evidently there are some who believe. This is the weird part. I think was it Gun Fetish Barbie who said something about Jesus taking your guns. Because she thinks that he'd have the big AR-15 with the huge capacity round magazine and the silencer and the little toy pack military outfit. That's not the kind of, at least it's not the kind of religiosity that I think of. I think of feeding the hungry, helping the poor, healing the sick, visiting the imprisoned. Caring for the least of us, not kicking them. And I see a lot of these programs that are trickling out of the Republican fringe. Understand, the Republican Party still strong in the, hey, we've got to enrich the wealthy. But there's a movement inside the Republican establishment right now, or inside the Republican Party, that's moving the establishment away from Reaganomics, away from the trickle-down stuff that has been so destructive to this country. And this could be a moment where you go, I agree. But the devil's always in the details. If I can get somebody to go, you know what, we're going to help families, I'm going to come along. Again, devil in the details. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, you can download the podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You'll find ours. Are you surprised by the pivot? The hypocrisy of, yeah, we've been wanting to destroy all of these social safety net programs, but now they're starting to turn around? I'm curious your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
We've been farming the same farm for 3 generations, and it's just always been where I've wanted to be. Any farmer you talk to in Montana will tell you that the climate is definitely changing. The weather is way more extreme. We went from the wettest year we've ever had to this year with the worst drought we've had since the 80s. We have done everything we can to keep water going, but it got close to running out. Farmers can't afford the cost of climate change. Congress has to get this done.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At The Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right, left, or red, blue, when they are and always have been up, down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working-class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people, for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.